Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to have today Daniel Sheahan, hopefully. So I'm speaking it correctly. It is a
Sheahan.
Shin. Shin. Perfect. So first of all, it's the first time when I do it. It's the second time technically because I was debating with someone, which we know the Sig. You know Siegfried.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, so I was debating him, but this time is the first time on my YouTube page when I'm inviting someone discussing religious topics, but in not in Romanian. So I'm native Romanian. My audience is more or less mostly I'm on a page of discussions, which they talk typically religious topics, and most of the people from that page are either typically Romanian Orthodox, some parts of Protestant, I'm thinking more or less evangelicals. I know there are distinctions. So more or less like Pentecostals, or the bulk of Romanians are Orthodox. But there could be a Catholic listening, and you are welcome. Whoever will join as a Catholic, you are welcome. So most of the people listening, because I was myself an ex-Baptist, they know me and they may comment from time to time in comments saying, no, you got this biblical reference wrong, or whatever they would put. So my audience mostly it will be atheist or evangelicals, but some Orthodox too. Orthodox are close to Catholics. I think you heard about them if you are not in contact with them. Russians would be typical Orthodox. Can you say something about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Daniel, and I was Catholic for the majority of I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic schools, Catholic undergrad, and not just any Catholic undergrad. It was one of the 10 schools on the Cardinal Newman list, which was the list of the most 10 Catholic colleges in the United States. And usually you'll go to a school and you'll have training in whatever program it is, but a lot of our classes were specific to religion, and that was just part of the required education even at this university. Part of the training was you had to be trained in theology. So religion became very important to me, and for a long time I was very pro religion, very pro Catholicism. But also during most of my upbringing, I would do debate in a mostly Protestant debate league. And so I was very well trained in the ideas and concepts of evangelical and fundamentalist Protestantism. So religion for me was extremely important, both because of my family and their Catholic upbringing, but also because most of the friends who I would hang out with would be Protestant or evangelical. So that was always an important issue. And as a filmmaker, that's the main thing that I focus on. I'm currently at USC. There's like a USC logo there. And so I'm getting my MFA in film production. And one of the things that you'll find is that film and philosophy are very closely aligned, because the underlying ideas behind most films are based in philosophy. So a lot of filmmakers, you'll find that's an important topic for any of us. So philosophy and religion became things that were very important to me. Um, that being said, I'm no longer religious. I'm still very interested in religious concepts, but I wound up moving away from Christianity. And the reason why was I was 24 and I read the Quran, which it's not that I read the Quran and went, wow, I'm being spiritually moved. I must convert to Islam. It was actually that I read the Quran and went, this is unconvincing. I don't know why, starting from a position of not believing in this, I would read this and go, wow, I must convert. And I realized that the reason for that was when I read it, I was reading it from an objective perspective, from a perspective of not trying to read it and go, this is the word of God. I will look for every reason to believe this is the word of God. I was just reading it from an objective perspective. And then I asked myself, okay, well, if that's the way I feel when I read the Quran, why don't I read the Bible the same way? And so I went back and I read the full Bible. And I was looking through it, and this time I was reading it the same way that I would read the Iliad, the same way that I'd read the Swiss Family Robinson or the Quran, and I found myself completely unconvinced. And there were actually a lot of ways when I was reading, I was like, well, if I just thought about this in a different sense, maybe that actually means something totally different. So all my life I've been reading it thinking, oh, I'm going to try and prove this. I'm going to make sure that I believe in this. But then reading it again from an objective perspective, it simply didn't come through. And so one of the things that I started to think about is how the book, the Bible, well, it's a collection of books, but each of the books in the Bible seem to point more, even if we were to interpret it as accurate, it doesn't seem to suggest the concept that Christians come up with of this all powerful, omnipotent, omniscient, perfect, and all loving deity. When many of the actions, whether within the Bible or within the world that we see, seem to strongly suggest that if there was a creator, which is, I'm not going to rule out the potential of a creator, that's what this topic here is. If there was a creator, this creator would not be infallible, they'd be someone who could make mistakes. And I think if we look at our world, we see a world that is full of mistakes. For instance, if this world was created for humans, like supposedly Christianity says that it is, why would 70% of the earth be made up of water, which is uninhabitable by humans? Why, if you're creating a universe in which you are an all loving, all powerful being, why would you come up with the concept? And this one is one that just like, I can't fathom this if this was actually the case. Why would you have women once a month have a period? If you wanted to let women know that they are not pregnant, why would
Yes,
your
I
concept be, I must have them bleed from their vagina and be sick for a week? Why
I,
would that be
I,
what you come up with?
I'm going there. I want to say first of all that I came from Protestant path, so I'll first of all very likely debate you a few years ago. Also around a year, but what I this is a bit different from the background. You are Catholic, which great for you. I'm in Eastern Europe, which we were, under the communist rule. I'm not sure if you know kind of how it worked, but there was a strong. The state was basically communist and atheist, but people were basically everyone was religious under the door, if you understand what I mean. It's like if you'll be a Christian in a Muslim country, everyone was Christian under Muslim rule, but outside they will themselves. So anyway, what I want to say, I was exposed a lot of scientific. I have many, I don't know how to say, researchers, basically PhD researchers in chemistry, biology, things like that. So even I was a Baptist, I was thinking that there is a truth behind it. The creation would be a weaker term. It's like the guideline, like the driving rules, but the creator that makes everything, it was not true. But anyway, I know I was a minority. I had once that I was getting a lot of flack from my brothers, and I would say that the protest. I know Protestants, for example, they don't accept evolution, but I was one of the few Protestants that would fully embrace evolution and creationism in a way. But uh, so please continue. But I agree with your thesis. Like when you look around, something doesn't add up, doesn't glue together.
Yeah, and so one of the concepts that I found very convincing was the idea of it's more of a thought experiment because Christians and Muslims will try and use different arguments to prove the existence of a creator. But many of these arguments, even if they were correct, don't necessarily prove an infallible creator. This concept that they have of the omniscient, omnipotent, all perfect. Well, I guess Islam doesn't believe in the all perfect, but at least omniscient and omnipotent creator. But the the issue that I have with that is if you have an argument like there must be an unmoved mover or any of Thomas's five ways, all of these things simply point to the idea that there's something bigger than our universe. But that doesn't mean that that being outside of our universe, assuming one exists, would have to be all perfect, all knowing, and all powerful. All it would mean is that they would have to be greater than our universe. In the same way we within our own universe do create other universes. Like, for instance, the creators of a television show have created a fully different universe which exists outside of time and space. But no one would suggest that the showrunners of a TV show are omniscient and omnipotent. They are simply greater than the universe that they created. The same would be true for video game universes like Grand Theft Auto or Life is Strange. To the characters within that universe, they might come up with the concept that, oh, my creator is omniscient and omnipotent. But as we know from being in our universe, the creators of the GTA universe are not omniscient and omnipotent. In the same way, in our world, people come up with this concept that, oh, there must be a creator who would be omniscient, omnipotent, and all loving. He loves me. But we don't necessarily have evidence of that. So, any piece of evidence that someone could use to point to the concept of an infallible creator, there isn't one that could not be better or equally explained by a fallible creator. So this is a huge hole that I see in the concept of most monotheistic religions, and it would better explain something like the former Greek gods who were clearly fallible and would fight with each other, or the Roman gods, or the Norse gods.
You
Uh,
mean basically a capricious God
yeah,
for the
yes.
audience.
Even if there were creators, and so I'm not taking a position whether or not there are creators or
Hmm.
not, but I am saying if there was a creator, the evidence of a universe which we see which is flawed, and even the arguments that Christians or Muslims would make themselves would point equally or more so to the concept of a fallible, finite creator than that of an infallible one.
I want to interject one thing. As you said this, you missed the Jews, and I know some Jews. And a traditional view, if you read the Old Testament, and this I was debating, in fact, with Sig, it was exactly that the Jews, I don't know how to say it. The best way to describe it is that the God is powerful, but not necessarily all powerful. And when you join, you have these rituals, whatever, the law, kosher, and so on. You basically go on the side of God, but God is good and evil in the same time. So, for example, when he kills Job, not Job, the family, and gives new children, to me, this is a maniacal God, but that's not the point. But when he kills the family, in the part, because you are on the part of God, God will give you more of the things which you are value at the time, because children were property, sheep, or whatever they had. So the God of the Old Testament, in fact, in my view, is capricious, and it's quite transparent in the code, sorry, in the script, like, let's say. And this is a misunderstanding of Christians when they try to get a Greek kind of philosophy, this kind of Platonistic, that like Aristotelian logic, for example, says whatever is not false is true. And so basically whatever is not evil is good, or things like that. And many words of Jesus are even interpreted, who is not with us, it's against us. This kind of view, this is mostly a Greek view, which is imposed on the Jewish thinking. But to me, you missed the Jews, and I would say that some Jews, even I know Jews, they have this view like the God is more or less capricious, but it's on our side. We are the chosen by an imperfect boss. I don't know, bully, cosmic bully, to say so. But okay, just interjecting.
Yeah, but even when it comes to Judaism, I think you're still dealing, like you said, with a capricious God, a God who is not at least all loving, and even with the Jewish God, the arguments that you would point to still would not disprove some concepts like deism, the idea that a God created us and then left us alone, or they also wouldn't disprove the idea that it would have to be that specific God. The only reason that they have to believe in that particular God is that they believe they are the chosen ones who that God is acting in the interest of. But that's when you then get into the concepts of things like the flawed universe as a whole, because it's not just an all powerful God who chose them and is capricious. It's also the fact that the universe we see much stronger suggests a God who was not just evil, but also like not capable. Because if the point, like the supposedly the earth being made for us, that's not the world we see. The world does not seem to have been created in a way that is made just for humans. It's much
I
stronger
agree.
suggests something.
It makes sense. The world is not
Yeah.
made for us. Uh, before we were talking a few minutes on chat, and I was saying, like, if I will take the living being on the land, what's the world looking for us to be done? I would think ants. Ants have the same biomass when we were at least around. If I think when we'll reach 9 billion, we'll just overtake as biomass the ants. But the ants are as biomass, like weight, if you put on a scale. And obviously, I have whatever, let's say 200 pounds. It will translate in so many uh, ants there. So God is obsessed with ants. And if you'll go into the ocean, it will be the krill. Krill is like a crab, which whales eat. So God is obsessed by this kind of arthropods, basically, or with small legs, kind of insect beings. Looking on our Earth, it's definitely not looking made for humans. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you bring up something like ants, what that really does for me is it raises the question of, if we are to assume that a omniscient, omnipotent deity exists, why would they create an ant? Why would that be part of their plan? Why would they create flies? And like you said, krill. Why would they create all of these different individual beings when they could have chosen something else? In the same way, that's why I bring up things like periods. Why, if you wanted to let women know once a month that they are not pregnant, why would you choose this particular method? Why wouldn't you just have them raise their arm once a month? Like an uncontrollable natural urge to raise their arm. And now, oh, once a month they know they are not pregnant because their arm raised. Or maybe their hair randomly stands up. And all of a sudden they have this huge like hair, like if they have long hair and it's standing up to the ceiling. It'd be weird, but it would make actually more sense than the
yes,
method that
more
is chosen.
comfortable, definitely. So
So it's just, if you look at the world, why would anyone look at this and go, the best explanation is an all-powerful, mystical almost being? And I don't see an answer to that beyond just wanting to believe in one.
I agree. The to me, I also think, but this is my take, because I myself, I wasn't strictly a creationist. I was definitely exposed to them. To me, what it feels to me is like there is this kind of mistrust. So, for example, evolution. To me, what it looks to me the evilest part of evolution. Evolution is simple to understand. Let's say you are 6 or 7, you'll get it. Maybe 8 years old. But what's the harshest detail is that the when you look on the Bible, you'll see like God controls your world around it. Like you said, it's the world is made for you. You see a purpose. But here the evolution says the same. Let's say the land modifies you, and if you are not good for the land, it will kill you. If you can't reach quick enough up an uphill, you will not be. If you will not run from the predator will eat you, for example. And this is a very harsh reality of evolution, and you have to cope with it. And I think this is the worst part, that they think that if we'll accept science, we will get to a God that is very incompatible. So you don't want to learn too much about the science, because it gets a loving God with that if you are short enough, you'll die. If you are not resistant enough, you'll die. I think this is the hardest part for kind of literalists, in my view.
Yeah,
There
I'd
is a
agree with that. And there's a question coming in, but also I'll quickly just, I would agree with your concept that if we were to follow up the science more, I would agree that there is an emotional discontent with that concept to those who believe in the omniscient, omnipotent being, because there is, whether it's spoken or unspoken, at least I know that I kind of had this when I was Christian. I was kind of worried what that path would lead to, because you want to believe in a world where there is a God who loves you and who has looked out for you and has created this universe for you and will take care of you if things goes wrong. So there's an emotional fear almost. And this probably isn't something that we would ever be like, oh, I'm scared of this. But it's sort of a subconscious thing in the back of your brain that you don't want to challenge that concept because it's safer to believe in this all loving God. And there's a question he's asking: what if you would ask God the same why it would have been different? If I was so this would assume that the God exists and I could have a conversation with him, and that I would ask him something like, why would you have created a periods for women? Why would you have made a world that is clearly flawed? Why would you have created evil? All of these different things. If I was able to have a physical conversation with God, I don't think there would be a way for me to uh, disbelieve in the concept of God, considering He would be right in front of me. It would be irrational of me not to believe in that being I'm having that conversation with, unless of course my brain was being fooled. Like if somehow I was having a conversation with a projection of a God. But assuming that's not the case, assuming I'm having an actual conversation with this God, I would believe in that God. That being said, this God has had multiple opportunities at any stage of my existence to create that conversation with me. Because again, if this is an actually omnipotent, omniscient being, he not only knows what my brain will do and what I will be thinking, he also has the power to communicate with me in any way that he chooses. So, for instance, he could literally set up a Zoom conversation with me. He could appear right in front of my face. He could appear to the entire world all at once, and we all would physically see him. Instead, for some reason, it appears, if we are to take the narrative of Christianity or the narrative of many of these religions, um, he chose to hide himself, which seems like a foolish way. If you have created a universe in which an eternal amount of happiness follows on 80 years or so of existence, and 80 years in comparison to eternity is like it is the smallest possible amount of time. It is infinitesimally small. That's like grading acceptance to college on a 0.05 second test. It's just unfathomably unfair and unjust. But if that's
I
actually the
wanted
way
to
he chose it,
interject.
oh,
Yeah,
what you got?
yes, it's that I think you missed the question. I will answer at least my take,
Sure.
and I'll let you comment my take or not. Is that if you'll be able to ask him, for now, it means that you still have the reasons to see that God is not having a good creation. So if you can ask him why, so he exists, right? So okay, let me put back. So the question is related, like raising the hand, and you'll ask why. So I'm saying that if, okay, I will use a worst example, but let's say Stalin, or you heard about the Stalin, or uh, Kim Jong, whatever. There is this kind of evil god. He names himself a god, and he created the evil world. And what if you can ask him why? But you see, the world is bad. It's just this creation is bad. So asking it why doesn't change the state of the world that is not functional. So I think that asking why, it will not solve much, as you can evaluate objectively, as you said. As you read Quran, you see not impressive. You read the Bible, you see it not impressive. You see the creation, you see it not impressive. So that's my view. But okay, I'll adjust that. Sorry.
Well, I think the problem with the question is that it presumes the existence of God in the first place. It's so strange to ask whys forever to God's choices. But you got to understand the reason why I'm asking these questions is not to have a conversation with God and ask him why. That's not actually why I'm doing this. I'm doing this as a thought experiment to test whether or not the world that we see is proven by the story, the narrative of Christianity that we are told. Can we use one to prove the other? And so then you ask the question, if this, then this, logical syllogism. So if there was an omnipotent, omniscient deity, then we would expect a world which is consistent with that vision, a world which is made. If that omniscient, omnipotent deity supposedly told us this world is meant for us, then we would expect to see a world which is not made up of 70% of water. We would expect to see a world which has more value, more purpose, we would expect to see a world in which flaws are not so commonplace, because the existence of those flaws strongly suggests, if we started from a neutral position, they strongly suggest that there is either no creator or a creator who was flawed and didn't have the ability to update those flaws. There's a new question. If an individual came to you and said, this is the things that you should do and this is the things you should not do, just follow prescriptions, is that a good way to get your morals? Even no. No, it's not. I might listen to some individuals who I trust based on previous experience, who would say things, and I'd be like, I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's an interesting perspective. If they have good logical reasons for why to believe something morally, like for instance, I've heard really good arguments from some people on call out, which that's how I met Cyprian in the first place, and he mentioned Siegfried was another guy who's was on call out, and I learned a lot from a lot of Siegfried's perspectives and some of his moral stances I wound up adopting for myself. Or Ben Hewitt was another guy who was on call out, and he made me strongly consider veganism, because he had like moral claims about veganism, which I'd never considered before. So I wouldn't listen to an individual and go, oh, you have a strong set of moral codes, I'm just going to adopt all of your moral codes because you told me to. But if an individual has good logical reasons for why they believe what they believe, then it would be in my best interest to either agree with them or at least strongly consider how they got to those conclusions, and then consider taking on some of those beliefs myself.
I will interject. I like to interject. So looking to the God, at least Christian God, is the most known code of laws is the Ten Commandments. And he says you should have no other gods, but supposedly there is no other God, at least from the Christian view, maybe Satan, or some people say the money or whatever. But the second commandment said you shouldn't have carved things as he carves the things. So I can't see, as you say, a good mental framework to say this is the guy I should follow. And he said, hey, by the way, you shouldn't name me in the wrong way, my name, Yahweh, tetragram. You shouldn't say it badly. And also, don't forget Saturday, but from sunset to sunset, this you should not work. This is my day. I rested sometimes. So this looks really at random, these laws. And especially the one when he carves himself the commandments, when he says you shouldn't carve things. And after that, he says for these commandments, if you remember saying, this put it in the Holy of Holy. So don't worship carved things, but this part put it as the thing to worship most. Put it in a box, or how is name, an Ark of the Covenant and so on. So this guy makes no sense, thinking outside of the box, not having an attachment. So
yeah, I completely agree when it comes to the Ten Commandments, and that's actually, I think that if we tie this back to the whole concept of a what is most consistent with the world that we see. If I was to ask anybody, what are the 10 things that you think we should tell people, like, that are the most important rules that should be followed for all of time? The first 3 that I think would have to be on any list: don't kill people, don't rape, and don't torture. So those would be expected to be inside of the 10 commandments. And don't kill, that is the 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. But nowhere do the 10 commandments say thou shalt not commit sexual assaults or rape. There is one which says don't covet thy neighbor's wife, but that has nothing to do with sexual abuse. Just means don't, and it's also somewhat sexist in the sense that it's assumed that the wife is part of his property. It's not do not covet another woman. It's do not covet a man's wife.
Yes, and then it says the donkey, so it's
yeah, exactly, and it's compared to other forms of property. Yeah, and there's nothing about torture. Along the same lines, we know that this is consistent with the mindset of that God, because throughout the Old Testament, God orders or stands by, as his chosen people, commit genocide against entire villages. God is quoted as saying that he desired this and that he required this, and that as the Jews carry out genocide against entire villages that includes men, women, children, and even slaughtering babies upon the rocks, is a direct quote. That is not the mindset of a God who would be considered all moral. And
Yes, and it says in other part you should slice the pregnant woman's belly in Hosea. So
exactly.
good stuff. Yes. So
Right. And there's even one section where it says, kill all men and keep the virgin girls for yourself.
yes, and all the animals.
And
But
all the
about
animals, yes,
yes.
which is both sexist and also sexually abusive. So when we're talking about whether the Ten Commandments or we're talking about the Old Testament as a whole, what this suggests to me is that the Ten Commandments and the way that the Jews acted was very consistent with how all communities at that time were acting. They would kill, commit genocide on those against them. They would then keep women for themselves because that's what would be pleasurable to them. That's how they would like enjoy existing, I guess. And then they would say that their gods told them to do this. So when we're looking at the Bible, we have the option of either interpreting it as, oh, this was a historical work by humans who were trying to justify their actions the same way that the ancient Greeks were, the same way that people in every society were doing. And when they would commit injustices, they would say, God told me to. Or we interpret it as, no, this is actually the all inspired, infallible word of God. And for whatever reason, when God made these 10 commandments, he just somehow forgot about rape and forgot about torture and then approved of the murder of infants and the genocide of entire villages. And
I will comment one thing,
sure.
the Jewish thinking. Again, I talk with and I'm reading theologians. But anyway, the interesting part is that the commandments were not moral commandments. This is a newer understanding. Like, let's say creationism, for example, it's a phenomenon, especially in the Western world, less than 150 years old, which is very surprising, maybe even for you. It's not like, even when you think like Newton was a creationist, he was really thinking in other terms because there was no other option, first of all. So, but anyway, let me go back to the Jews. The Jews, when they have this, for example, 10 Commandments, they were not a moral law in the sense like we name it today moral law, but there is no moral in say these are the moral commandments or the righteous commandments or word like this. But it says this is basically the contract between God and the Jews. So it was like, I don't know, if I go to US, the contract the second commandments, I can get weapons, for example. It's a bad proxy, but you understand, I personally as a European, I don't see it moral, but it was just a contract like the Constitution for them. So it didn't have, and the God, I said to you, it was capricious. And I also prefer the Old Testament exactly because I know it had more perspectives. It was more mixed because of the influences. But okay. Yeah, so the commandments were never moral, strictly speaking. And you'll know probably there is in Start of Deuteronomist, there is a retelling of the Ten Commandments. Do you know this retelling? What I'm talking about?
A retelling of the Ten Commandments? No, I haven't heard about this. What is this?
Yes, so look, don't boil your calf in the mother's milk. It's one of these 10 commandments. So there are two traditions of the 10 commandments, and one of them is this one. You shouldn't boil in the mother's milk the calf, the child of goat, basically. So, if you look, I look on Catholic censors, something like that, there is a site. It says something like this one is named the ceremonial law, the Deuteronomist, and the other one is named moral law. But these are, again, very new constructs. But you should look, there are two sets of 10 commandments, which are two retellings which are wrong. It's like every gospel has a different retelling of the crucifixion, and they don't match. It's kind of the same stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd seen two versions of the Ten Commandments based on a Protestant or a Catholic reading of the scriptures, and like
I'm not
the
talking
numbers are
about
different.
the splitting. You'll talk basically how they split the commandments.
Right, exactly.
But no, both of them you'll talk about Exodus 20. I'm sure kind of the book is the second book of Exodus. Okay, so we have questions. But anyway, the Jews were not seeing at least in my understanding, reading Jewish understanding, that it was necessarily a moral code, but it was a contract code. So
Right.
it's like constitution and legislation, and
But like
you
the
can
questions we're asking about the concepts of like having a moral lawgiver,
right.
which people point to the Ten Commandments as their authority,
And
and
they are
ultimately,
bullshit. Yes,
yeah,
is
exactly.
the right honest.
I mean, that's a direct way. What's the explicit logical contradiction, or at least formal contradiction, between the existence of God, as you described him, and the fact that there is 70% water? So it's not necessarily just 70% water. It's the fact that you can look at the entire universe as a whole and question, is this universe compatible, and is the best explanation of this universe an infallible, all powerful, all loving being? And then you compare that to which is more likely, this type of creator or a creator who was flawed. So then you look to the Bible. And the Bible supposedly, and whether we're talking about most traditions, whether in most religions, hold that this universe is for us. Which, if you hold that, then you would have to explain that. Why would there be a universe which is for us, but 70% of it is uninhabitable for us? That would strongly suggest that it's not actually
This is
for
just the
us.
Earth, the all universe is mostly uninhabitable for us, to be
True.
fair, frank. So
Yeah, we can't live on Mars. Well, maybe we can
yes,
live on Mars. We can't live on Jupiter. We can't live on the
yes, and
sun.
realistically, also when you look on a specially designed thing, you'll think, let's say, a helicopter or a Ferrari or whatever. You think it's a designed thing, but when you look on the Earth, you'll see a ball, and only on this tiny sliver, only that is for us, and 70% is not for us too.
Right.
But on this sliver, because in fact, the God, if he would want, could just keep the sun and the earth, even that will be ideal, and nothing else, and it will be enough for us to live and keep the planets in the balance or whatever. No, throw a meteorite to kill the dinosaurs, and so.
And there's a mindset in the questions that you're asking. Is it Vasil? I'm not sure how to pronounce your name exactly, but you're coming from a perspective of, or at least I'm assuming you are a Christian, and so you're coming from a perspective of already believing in this and trying to square what I'm saying as necessarily like an attack on God. It's not an attack on God. The reasons that I'm bringing this up are as a logical test. So if you start from a position of neutrality and are just asking, is the world we see consistent with one of two options? Either a world created by a fallible creator or a world created by an infallible creator, and then asking which is more likely. And the significantly more likely option is that the world either had no creator or was a fallible creator. Then that the option is we have all these flaws in the universe, and then we try and explain that as an unflawed being created a flawed universe. That just isn't as likely as the idea that a flawed being did that. So then you ask the question, how do you know what is moral and immoral if there is no God? This is a common mindset among Christians that, oh, I have to have objective truth. I'm not sure why we need to have objective truth in order to have morals. Because even in societies that don't have a strong following of religion, like you look at Sweden right now, there's very little religion, and yet they have some of the lowest crime rates in the world. They have some of the highest happiness rates in the world. There's no need to have a specific religion in order to have happiness. Along the same lines, you could look at many Eastern countries. Eastern countries don't necessarily believe in a monotheistic deity, and yet they are able to be fully happy, and oftentimes they'll have low crime and low violence. So it isn't necessarily it isn't necessary to have objective morality. So I would not claim to know what is objectively moral. I don't know that. I am a finite,
I
fallible
can
being.
interject one thing.
Go for it.
You are from US. I know there is a stereotype, but I think it's mostly true that Bible Belt is not known for the most moral region of
True.
US. And if you go to, let's say, more liberal places, typically you'll expect, if you go to MIT, for example, or UCLA, you are close to, I understand.
Yeah,
To it.
USC is right by UCLA. They're our biggest rivals.
All right, so I follow also UCLA on YouTube and so on. Yes, but I'm saying when you go there, you don't feel terrified going on the hallways, whatever. So, and this is more or less the exactly godless regions of US, more or less. So I'm saying you can see it even in very strong Christian cultures, the same stereotype.
Right.
Um,
And it's subjective what morality is, but that's why we then have debates about it. That's why we study it, and we study philosophy, and we study happiness and how to bring about the best possible societies for people. And I have actually found since I left religion that I think I became a more moral person because I realized the importance of myself in the equation. It was no longer that I could just go, oh, God told me to do this, that's what's moral, period. I don't need to worry about it. Now, as I have to think about morality and I have to think about how can I be a value to the people around me, I have to spend time on that. I have to spend time on myself trying to help others, trying to come up with moral codes for how I wish to live and how I wish to be of value to those around me.
this is the last Vasily for now, and we will
No,
have
they're
a
not
second break.
objective truth. They are not objective truth. I would say they are as accurate as the human mind can come up with. But the concept that a finite being could know objective truth is one that I would consider impossible in the first place, because a finite being cannot exist outside of his universe. So that's why the whole concept of this discussion is a fallible universe, a fallible creator. And it's similar to how humans are fallible beings. So I cannot, as a human being, know that which is objective. So like the concept of objective truth would be that which is 100.0% certain. And
One
yet,
part which I can again interject. Sorry,
go for it.
in 19th century it was disproved mathematical there is an objective truth, and
Interesting.
uh, I was using the Aristotelian logic. So Aristotelian logic goes with this law of no contradiction. This, if it's not true, it's false, or whatever. So we know its name special maths. So you have a special, you can add values to truth. And most of the times, most of us have relative truth. And it's in this sense, like there are few things when you ask directly, is it a thing true? So do you have blonde hair? Uh, and let's say it's a yes. I don't know. It looks blonde to me. But I would say this is true. But what is interesting that even I'll ask this question, if you will get to close to 80, maybe it's a false statement because you'll have white hair. So the truth, in fact, most of the what is named absolute algebraic logics, they have kind of four values of truth, and they have two forms of undefined. And the truth, absolute truth, is just for the moment. So this is even the logics which have absolute truth. And there is an extra field of mathematics which is named fuzzy logic. When they say it's like I forgot how to say, a gradient, basically. So, for example, when you boil your egg, if you boil eggs, you are vegan maybe now, you are saying, I don't know. But let's say if you boil an egg, I'll ask you, is the egg ready when it fries there on your pan? And you never have an absolute truth when you say yes. You'll have to go to a stage when from that stage it goes ready. And after that, it will go over fried. If you understand what I mean, it's a spectrum. So it will go from false when the egg is fully transparent to mostly ready to over fried, which is not ready anymore. So that as the time goes, so this is the fuzzy logic. Maybe I didn't explain it too well, but we know at least the fuzzy logic is defined from 60s. The algebraic multiple values of truth is from 19th century. So when Christians come, some of them like absolute truth, objective truth, there isn't, and it's mathematically built a foundation for it. So, sorry to go to this tangent. It's close to my field.
No, that's awesome. I don't know if I'd necessarily say there's no math, like no possibility of absolute truth, because like even what you said there sounded more like it was saying um, there that objective truth, assuming one exists, would change over time, but that would
Yes,
still mean that
so
it would
only for the
exist.
small quanta of time you can say there are mathematical proofs of absolute truth, but in the classical mathematics. So here Vasil is partially correct and partially not. So in classical mathematics, he's right. But we know that classical mathematics has limitations, like infinity. It's one of them. So zero, in fact, it's one of them. Uh, there are a lot of undecidable math. Like there is a Christian, in fact, proving there is undecidable math. His name Gödel. He has a set of equations. He proves God, supposedly. He's mathematically, but he was not so convincing for his colleagues. But there is the proof that mathematics is limited, and especially the classical one. And Gödel, what he proves is that you have to add always infinite numbers of axioms to get to the full truth. But axioms, they are unproven. So you always have holes in the knowledge of math. Again, it's a statement proven mathematically by this guy. Okay, so this is a full, getting full tangent.
Well, it's a tangent, but there's a thing I would add to it though, which is to keep it on this whole concept of fallibility. Even if there was absolute truth, the fallible mind would never have access to an infallible concept. We might believe that we know objective truth, but we would never have the ability to verify it. For instance, if the characters in GTA believed that they knew with objective certainty what their purpose was, they would have no way of actually verifying that, because the only people who can verify that are the creators of GTA, who are out in our universe. So we as finite beings could not say with certainty any answer necessarily. We could know it to the highest potential of human knowledge, but human knowledge is necessarily finite. So there would never be a situation in which we could say with 100.0% certainty that we know objective truth. We can guess, we can believe, and we can get to the highest level of logical belief, but we can't verify it ourselves.
Yes, I think it's reasonable. One part which I wanted to add, and I was surprised no one commented, is that if you think the creation is perfect, I still think it has at least one flaw, especially getting on the moral statement. And I was thinking, is that God supposedly didn't create only this world, whatever it means, but it created also a heaven and a hell. And these ones look like a very flawed concept to me. Both because we are talking just about now about morals. The concept of heaven and hell, it's basically means we don't do justice now, first of all. So it's a God which is all powerful, but will let a lot of imperfections to happen. Like as you said, the people not to get raped, it will be kind of instant. But God doesn't intervene. Okay, He has this commandment, but if He will do Himself justice, He will say it's fine. But we expect that the heaven or hell will do kind of justice, and both heaven and hell they don't do justice. I can't think a person to be rewarded infinitely and to be justice for no matter which reason, and also to be fun because probably you'll just praise Lord. And also I can't imagine, I will use the worst name, Hitler, for example, and sorry for people who suffer through the pain in their families, but I can't think even Hitler to be punished for eternity. I can think 1,000 years, it's fine, let's say, but even at this level the creation looks so flawed, like, and supposedly they exist, like so to me it looks the world it's unfair, and supposedly the solution of the creator it's also unfair itself to fix the fallen world. And because I would assume the first criticism it will be about that Satan, it's like they missed the dog in the here somewhere on the earth. So the creation was perfect, but the Satan broke it. I think it's a view that some Christians have, like the sin broke the world.
There are three things that I want to follow up on what you just said there, because I think that was a really good like setup, and then I think there are a few points that can add on to that. The first one would be that the existence of heaven disproves the idea of a perfect creation, because we already know within the Christian tradition that a world could be designed better, because the concept of heaven is by definition better than this current world. So we already know that there would, assuming the existence of the Christian God, he had the potential to create this universe better and chose not to. So that already disproves the idea that this world was perfectly designed. It was not. Because if it was perfectly designed, it would already be heaven. The second point would be that creating Satan is a clear proof of imperfect design. Why, if you were an all perfect, all powerful being, especially an omniscient one who knows exactly what's going to happen, why would you create your own nemesis? Why would you then blame that nemesis for any evils that your creation then falls into? And why would you allow that nemesis to create ultimate suffering for your creation? That is evil. And yet, supposedly, these were the actions of an all perfect, all loving creator. That simply does not square. And a much better explanation would be if we are going to assume that a devil exists, which I'm not saying they do, but if one did, that would strongly suggest an imperfect designer who didn't realize what his creation was going to do. He created Lucifer and didn't realize, oh, wow, Lucifer's going to fight back and then he's going to hurt my creation. There is no reason to believe that an all perfect being would have done this, and a lot stronger reason to believe that a fallible being would have. And then the third issue is that of omniscience. And you talked about, for instance, creating Hitler. So one of the problems, and this was actually my main problem when I was Catholic, was the idea that God would create those who, in his omniscience, he knows he is damning to hell. And so I was like, why could God not just not create those people? Why not only create the ones who, in his omniscience, he knows in advance what they will do? Why would you create the ones who are going to suffer for eternity when you could just not create those? And I actually asked my philosophy professor at John Paul the Great Catholic University, why wouldn't this happen? And the professor answered at the time that existence is better than non-existence, even if that existence is eternal suffering, which did not make any sense to me whatsoever at the time. And then I actually read the Bible closer and realized he's just straight up wrong, because Jesus actually said at the Last Supper that he who dips his hands into the bowl with me, speaking of Judas, it would be better for him that he had never been born. But Jesus is God. So Jesus created Judas. And yet Jesus says it would have been better for Judas never to have been born, which Jesus could have made happen, but he chose not to. So we're either talking about a callous deity, which comes back to that concept that you had of the idea that the Jewish version of the creator was that he wasn't necessarily all loving. Or we're talking more likely about a story that unravels on itself, a story that just isn't accurate, a narrative that was created by a group of people similar to how all narratives are created to try to explain their existence, but it was a finite creation, a finite narrative, a fallible one. And that this creator is not actually an infallible creator, that our world is actually equally or better explained by a being who was flawed or just no creator at all. There's a new question here. How would a world with God in it and a world it's just like, how different would a world with God in it and a world without God in it be? Is that what you're asking?
To me, this is how it looks like.
So it depends on the type of God that we're talking about. If there's a world with zero creator, a world which somehow comes into existence on its own, you would see things that were entirely dependent on the rules of that universe, like, for instance, evolution, which is one possible explanation for our universe. And a world with a god entirely depends on the nature of that god. Like, are we talking about a callous being? Are we talking about a being who is using this world as a joke? Like the GTA universe clearly uses its characters as jokes, or the Rick and Morty universe would use its characters as jokes. The Breaking Bad universe is supposed to be similar to our universe. If we're talking about something like Life is Strange, which is a video game which I really love, where like our actions as the player change the actual way the story will develop, which I think is really really interesting. And I think that's part of what, um, as we continue to improve technology, we will continue to get more and more to the point where we could create worlds that are equally or even deeper than our current universe, based on similarities to that, how we could have the ability to change storylines as we go. But the reason I bring these things up is simply to say that it depends on the point of the universe and what the deity would want for that universe. But to tie this back to the overall concept here, I'm simply using this as a thought experiment of, are we comparing to the idea, this monotheistic idea of an omniscient, omnipotent, all loving, all perfect being? Is that the most likely explanation for our universe? Or is it more likely that we have a universe where that particular being didn't actually create us?
I have not interject more. It's perfect what you say. So one part which I also think it's bad is like I want to say a story. I said to you in short, but people will not believe me. So after this week, when I was talking with Daniel, everyone knows kind of I live in Lithuania, but I didn't have an English Bible. I mean, I have it online, but I read the Bible also in English. I had once when I was a Baptist King James Bible given as a gift, but I didn't like it. I can say why. But anyway, this week, basically, we have on our ground floor block of flats, some people put a Bible just for me. So God exists. It's a good one, and He wanted to us to be saved. I'm joking. So, but anyway, I took it. It has even maps how to see it, the Bible from the Old Testament and the New Testament and so on. But what it looks to me also very strange, because it's this biblical view. The Bible, it's I don't know, it's quite an imperfect book how we got it here. So the Bible itself, if you think how you get it, most of people didn't get the Bible. So even the tradition that would explain. Yes, so I'll have to write this. So I know God loves me. So one part which I also got, but from a different part, is that this view, like the Bible, gets somewhere basically from the clouds and falls back into your shelves. It's a very naive view of the world. So it's not matching the world, like we said. But also when you see this God of the Bible, the book is not a good literature, really. Like if you read, who I would read, Jack London, for example. I'm not sure if you are so familiar, but for example, it has a lot of Christian, basically, story of the Protestant industrial era. Like it has I'm not sure if you know this small series of Love of Life of Jack London. Maybe yes, maybe not. Okay, so Jack London, it has this White Fang story. Okay, so but for example, Jack London has a deeper story of people basically struggling. It has this kind of series of novel named Love of Life, and one of the key story, which is supposedly based on a real story, it is that a person in the Alaska region remained without. Basically, he remained injured. He was carrying a sledge with dogs, and basically even the dogs die, and he gets injured as he walks through the ice, and eventually he survives. He reaches a boat, and they give him food, and he saves even there the biscuits. So this is one. We have a lot of stories. First of all, deeper than the Bible, and also the life sometimes is harsher than a very dramatic sad story. I was saying another example. maybe you've seen, there was once happening in Hollywood, if I remember, something like that is the title of the movie by Tarantino. Have you? Yeah. So what is surprising is the story of Charlie Manson at the end. But Tarantino, who is known as a very cruel storyteller, his universe is nicer than the real world. If you remember the ending, sorry for people spoiling it for them. But we have worlds which are definitely better quality, and the world of the Bible is not well written. It's not that deep, especially for today's standards, and it's not interesting. Like it doesn't feel perfect in the way like you can make. I don't know if you use Asimov's for foundations books or things like that. You can see worlds which look at least more coherent. You feel smarter at the end, to say so, for the better term. And okay, and I will put one more here, part. So for example, what I have in my part, I'll put myself, and I will break. So I was promoting in one of my clips this Spong. Spong is a very known uh, bishop. He's Episcopalian. And for example, in this book says why Christians should accept evolution and why this world makes no sense. And the other part, the other book, which here it goes only on one gospel, Matthew. It's the first gospel if you start the New Testament. It goes why the author, for example, specially corrupts the Bible or the message, the tradition, to fit his theological roles. He has an agenda. So, okay, so why I got with this Bible and creation is that the Bible looks like a very weak case, not only matching the reality, but as literature. It's badly written. You know probably better than me what a Mary Sue is. Uh, this perfect Jesus is made as a Mary Sue in Gospels, in my view. So to me, also I want to say that the tradition of Christianity, especially this kind of fundamentalist one, it's very devoid to me, at least, of literature, philosophy, the Greek philosophy, even when it started from. So it makes it itself a very weak case, uh, even culturally. So maybe it's a
Sam
tangent.
Harris. Sam Harris said that it's strange that God made Shakespeare a better writer than himself.
Right. So that's exactly the point I wanted at the end kind of to make. So to me, the literature of creationists in particular, it is cringe-worthy very often because it has all the, I mean, theologians today, especially, I use Spong as a reference. They will criticize this kind of view of creationism because it makes no sense even as theology. Like they got, and it's not like you took the Bible out of context. What is the most common hearing? But for example, I was commenting like earlier in the evening, the Jewish has a different understanding of the gods. Protestants, most, I think they don't know it, and even Christians. I would assume. I'm not sure if you learn this at the Catholic school, but I learned it only reading even theologians. So, okay, there is one more question. Wow. So,
So the interesting thing about this question is you're talking about the main cosmological arguments for God. And part of the reason that I bring up this concept of a fallible creator is because we could accept all of the cosmological arguments, and it still doesn't even get close to proving the God that you're supposedly trying to prove. Because all that they would prove is that there's a creator who's bigger than this universe. But that doesn't mean anything. In the same way that the creators of Rick and Morty, the creators of any TV show or any video game are fallible beings, the creator of our universe could have been just the same. So even if we accept all the cosmological arguments, Thomas's five ways, etc., you're still left with this huge void in getting to actually proving the Christian God or the Muslim God. The Jewish God is a little easier because the Jewish, and I guess the Muslim God a little too, because the Muslim God accepts the fact that Allah could be evil. But certainly the Christian God is the hardest one to actually then prove, because it's out of, what does it mean the creator is bigger than the universe? Uh, it means they are not constrained by the boundaries of that universe. For instance, if I create a video game, I am not inside of that video game. I am not bound by the time and space of that game. But me, myself, I can't leave our universe unless something outside of our universe was to pull me out of this universe. In the same way, the characters in the video game that I create could not leave that game unless I somehow figured out a way to make them leave that video game and come into my real world. But the interesting thing about that, I can't, because I'm fallible. I don't have all powerful ability to manage the characters in my video game to make them leave their universe. I can create a universe. I'm greater than that universe. I'm bigger than that universe. But I can't make, like, if, especially if you think about the flaws in our current video games and TV shows and things, we're not all perfect. So when we create things, our technology is not advanced enough to create all perfect universes. There's going to be flaws in the coding. There's going to be things that we can't make characters do just because we don't know how. We are greater than the universes we create, but that doesn't mean that we create all powerful, all loving. It doesn't mean we, the creators, are this omniscient, infallible being. And the same concept would hold true with our universe. If we saw a universe that we live in, if our universe was mind-blowing beyond belief and there was simply nothing that our finite brains could think of to improve it, okay, I could understand that as being a proof for the idea of an all-powerful, omniscient being who really truly thought of everything in advance and created the perfect universe for us. I could understand that, but we don't see that universe. So it strongly points to the idea that if we had a creator, even if we accept all the cosmological arguments, even if we take all of that at face value, that creator would have still been fallible in some way or the other.
And I could even improve on what you said a bit earlier. You said that if basically if the God will be benevolent, he could create a good universe, right? A nicer, at least one. But I would say, getting to with your example with the GTA, right? So you can make a game, and I'm thinking right now on Nintendo games because they are so censored. So like Super Mario Galaxy or whatever it's named. These are very, very nice worlds, more or less. So for example, no one dies, coins jump when you hit something. But this still doesn't prove the, if we'll censor so well the Mario universe, it doesn't make the creator benevolent or something like that. So even if there will be this universe, it will not prove the benevolence of it. But definitely it could prove malice if there is malice into the world, which we see. So I'm
Right.
saying the counter is not true. So if the
Or
universe will
there's
be
another
perfectly
purpose.
nice,
Or there's another purpose to our universe. Like the GTA universe is not a very nice universe. Everybody beats everybody up. Everybody is cruel to each other. But the reason why is something that those characters in that would never understand. But the reason why is because we laugh at them.
yes,
Like
they are a
they
parody of
literally
the
exist
society.
for as a joke to us.
Yes.
If you think that effect is smaller than the cause, then you are dealing with infinite regression of causes, which will prove that the initial should be the greatest. So it, I don't know how this applies. The initial cause of the GTA universe is its greatest cause. Sure. But that only gets you to one step beyond the universe. In the same way, the creator of our universe, one step beyond our universe, could have been a pimply faced college kid in whatever universe is above us. Even if you accept all the cosmological arguments, even if we talk about infinite regression, we can only get outside of our universe, and then we don't know what happens up there. Like in the universe above us, is there gravity? Are there all the laws of thermodynamics? Are there, like, do people exist? is the world outside of us, assuming one exists, are there humans? Is it a world of elephants who are extremely conscious? Do elephants exist? We don't know. We have absolutely no way of knowing, because all we can know is what's existent within our universe, because we are finite beings. So outside of this, like the concept of infinite regression can only get to the extent of our universe, and then we can't prove anything beyond that. So then what we as people, finite beings, have is the ability to look around our universe, recognize the fact that we are fallible, we can't know things, we can't know everything, but we can make educated opinions based on the world we see. And the educated opinion is, we have a flawed universe. This strongly would suggest that we have a flawed creator, or that we have no creator.
I agree. I I personally also think that this infinite regress, in fact, is not an infinite regress. Most of the times, it's a wrong framing. Like you say, like the universe has a beginning, and so I forgot. For example, the kalam is like everything that begins to exist has a beginning, has a cause, or something like that. The universe has a beginning, but the universe has a beginning in English has a different creation than the, I don't know, the regular thing. So if I say this, I'll use this book. So this book has a beginning. What do you mean? It's like you mean when it's finished printing, for example. So you have some matter that you organize it to make your definition of a book or whatever. You use it as a beginning, as a definition. But the universe, we don't understand the term. What means the beginning of the universe? It's a really an unknown. So maybe the have a beginning for the universe has a different meaning in English than the beginning of a book, for example. So they are not even uh, related logically. You understand? It's like evolution of cars versus evolution of, well, whatever beings, like theory of evolution. It's really wrong equivocation.
And that ties back to when we're talking about the concept of objective truth. Thanks for coming by, man. Thanks for the questions that you presented. They're really useful, and it makes for a fun discussion. But Cyprian, I was just going with like language and the barriers of language. I think that's another aspect of when we talk about, can someone know objective truth? Well, even if objective truth was knowable, we finite beings would then have to interpret it using the tools we have available to us, which are limited by language, and they're limited by our finite brains, and they're limited by there's simply no way, with all of the flaws that we have as a species, that we could then say, oh, I know objective truth. Do you know objective truth in English, or do you know it in Spanish, or what? Which how did you properly interpret? Are you sure that interpretation is correct? And then someone says, oh, I know it, but you're a finite being, you can't know that.
Right, and the knowledge is very often limited by predicaments. Like uh, I know this is born out of a virgin, and I know that you eat this. How it was? I will not talk about Sam Harris, uh, about Latin words over. Okay, so let's skip that part. The the deeper issue at the end, I think that the creation itself, other part which I got from my background, like a scientific background, is that if there will be a creation, you should see scientific papers. And what have you heard about this Dover trial in US?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so for people not knowing, it was say your, I think you know what is it. You say it better in English than me. So the Dover.
That was the one with the like they made a
Kids
movie
Miller.
about it, right?
Yes, it was on PBS, a movie about some creationist pandas and people book. So okay, I think it was in 2006, the year, something like that. And some creationist who brought a book alternative as a biology curriculum, and he was attacked by NCSC, something like that, science education, something like that. It was about non-profit, but anyway, the issue at hand was that some creationists presented as science the creationism, and one of the people who are doing it, it was a Discovery Institute. It's a think tank, got a lot of money from evangelicals, that's their benefit. But what to me it was surprising is that at around that time, scientists would put challenges, say to me, show to me the science. And one of the challenges, I think 2008, 2009, was saying to this Discovery Institute, discover a gene that was created. So the creator, we have all our human genome. Show to me one gene that in humans that was created or designed, or in any animal or any plant which we sequenced. And this is named the Discovery Challenge to Discover. Discovery Institute to Discover. The Discovery Challenge Institute, something like that, to discover. So something like that. And for 10 years, at least, we know that the Discovery Institute didn't discover any. I would assume that a good designer will create at least one gene for us, that it will be so good that you can see it, that a God intervenes. Like, you understand, if a person, let's say, has diabetes, sadly, you cut the leg. It's not ideal, but you cut the leg, but you know it's for the good of that person. If you'll know that there is a gene that gives you cancer or whatever, God would add at least something to cut the cancers or something like that. I would assume if I will be in this world, I will create at least one gene or 20 to make the life less miserable for people. Or if they die, at least to not die in pain, to have a switch. These are silly ideas. But anyway, you can think even this very small intervention that God could do. And at least to me also, it's a harsher reality. I'm not talking for the biggest pains, like we will say cancers or things like that, or wars, or some people say wars is free will, but I'm not talking even about the free will. There are many suffering like earthquakes, like Haiti was last week, very terrible earthquake. God will have to have some way that it's kind of observable. And right now we don't know, for example, in tens of thousands of genes, even one gene that a creator, and I would say if I would be a creator, I would cut some genes. I know I have one gene which makes me very allergic to pollen, and it's really horrible. I maybe you know allergic people. Um, yes, so I would want God to cut my gene, uh, that mutation.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think once you start thinking from this perspective of how to make the world better, everyone, whether they admit it or not, knows ways that the world could be better. Things that a all-loving being would have been able to accomplish. And I know this because even myself, who would never claim to be an all-loving being, I could figure out ways, just looking at this world, to show in my imperfect love a way to improve their lives. And if I can do that as an imperfect being, then how can I say that an all loving being didn't do that? It simply doesn't add up. That's and like one could say, and I think Christians do try to say this. They say that God is all loving, but He had reasons to cause suffering and to cause a world that is not as good, which is possible. But again, when we look at the question of what is most likely, because again, faith is something that's a choice. So the question is, should we put faith in the idea that this world was created by an all perfect, all loving, all omnipotent being? And if there's a equally or better alternative, then you should not put faith in the thing which is at best 50% likely and probably even less. And as soon as you say that, there's simply no reason to put faith in any of the major world religions.
I agree. Um, I think if there are no other questions, soon we'll prepare to wrap up. But I would want to, first of all, to say that So please put questions, please. So that I want to Daniel to say something about his work, which I'm very happy to him to self promote if he wants. And I'm very honored, and I hope that if you liked it, we'll do other time if he wants to. We didn't arrange it yet, so if you want, you like the public, the Romanian public, uh, I hope you'll come once again. But if not, or yes, please say something about you, because I think you are special as a movie creator. I noticed you got a prize. Congratulations, but better say it yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So yes, I do make movies. That's I'm in my final semester of a master's program at USC, which is one of the top film schools. And so one of the things that I've really focused on is creating content which hopefully can make a difference for others. So one of the stories that we made, which has been at festivals around the world recently, was a story about a mother who had to deal with the loss of her daughter during a school shooting. So we follow her when she gets the text from her daughter that there's a shooter at her school, which I know for maybe for Romanian audiences isn't as big of a fear, but certainly for Americans where school shootings are a massive issue, wanted to create something about that. I also have produced projects about sexism and how men often abuse women, and trying to create a culture in which the two genders, or the multiple genders, but particularly men and women, can have greater egalitarian mindsets toward each other, particularly when it comes to men against women. And so I try and create projects. If you want to find more about me, you can add me on Facebook. It's my name, Daniel Sheahan. I'm in Cyprian's Romanian debate group. I'm sorry, I don't speak Romanian, which I guess was a concern for one of the guys, but I will hit Google Translate and I'll happily talk to anybody. And Cyprian, this was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you. And I would love to have more of these sorts of conversations with you in the future. You're a cool guy, and I like this platform. So thank you.
Thank you a lot, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And we'll talk the next time. And I'll talk about the next part. So we try to do it once a month, typically. Once next month, I will have someone, but in 2 months, probably we'll talk again. If you like it and people like you, and I liked you, so and nice to see you around. And I hope that people will get more perspectives and will think for themselves. And thank you, Daniel, and thank you everyone who was around. I will give a link either to Facebook or at least to IMDb page to him in the comments. And see you next time. Bye bye.
Absolutely. Bye, Cyprian. Thanks.